Well, hello, and welcome to Board With Each Other. We're the board gaming podcast that looks at reviewing board games from the lens of a two-player perspective, whether that's your BFF, your significant other, or perhaps an evil scientist who's done some body swap and is trying to road test the successful experiment with a couple of cheeky quick card games with a board game podcast for you. So, for those of you who have listened to us before, you'll notice something a little bit different about tonight. Tonight, we're going to do a bonus special for you, and because of that, I'm going to be your host. So I'm Hannah Kelly, and I'm joined by your usual, ever faithful, apart from perhaps not for tonight, host, Al Simpson.
Hi, everybody.
So what we decided was that there were a couple of games that we kind of want to review that didn't fit into our normal review space. Maybe that's because they're too small, or perhaps, for example, they're out-of-print games that we felt that we couldn't really review in our normal episode of a podcast. So for tonight, we've got two games for you. So we're going to be looking at Codenames.
Yeah, Codenames
Duet, and Star Realms. And we're going to start off with Star Realms. Star Realms is a deck builder, and you start off each with 5 cards in your hand, and they are a mix of damage dealing cards and also monetary value, and you use those to either tear down your opponent and get their life from, I think it's 30.
Yeah, it's 25 or 30, I can never remember off the top of my head.
Down to 0. And then you use your coins to accumulate wealth and to buy new cards from the marketplace. The marketplace consists of, I think, 5 cards.
Yeah, it's 5.
And it's a shared marketplace, and at the end of your turn you can cash in any of your cards, any of your monetary values, or your coins, to then buy new cards. Those cards can be either they're all ships. Some of them do direct damage, some of them will give you health, some of them will give you more coins, and others can be actual outposts.
Yeah, bases.
Bases, yeah. And those will soak up damage for you.
Amongst other things.
Other things, yeah. You also have synergy, so you've got 4 or 5 different...
4 factions.
Yeah, 4 factions. You can tell that I'm not used to doing the rules.
First time for everything.
So you've got 4 different factions, and... if you play multiple cards of the same faction, there's usually a synergy within that, so you get to accumulate bonus rewards as a result. And that's kind of it. Have I missed anything?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I would mention is this differs from deck builder to deck builder, but you have to dump your hand at the end of every turn.
Yep, and it's shuffled.
Yeah, you can't keep cards carried over, and if you've listened to our Eon's End special, it hasn't got that wonderful thing of being able to put them back in any particular order. You just sort of dump them and use a skull pile, and that's shuffled, which is kind of the norm for deck builders.
Yeah. Games can be, well, we've had some very, very long games.
Huge variance.
Yeah, huge variance.
I have played a 2.5 hour game of Star Realms before.
Oh my goodness, okay.
Yeah.
So they can
Wasn't
be
with
really
you,
long.
with somebody else, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite unusual, but I would say
unusual,
probably
yeah.
about 15 to 20 minutes per game. And there are quite a few expansions, I think. Some of which change the rules quite substantially, which we don't have.
We have only got the base game and Colony Wars, which is basically like the base game. It doubles the base game, but it doesn't add any new mechanics.
And I think that's probably about all you need to know about Star Realms.
Yeah, as with most card games, the complexity in the rules is on the cards, not in the gameplay.
Absolutely. What I would also say is they do have variants specifically for 2-player play, so they have like a 2-headed giant where you fight a big bad, although we've never done that.
No, those variants are actually for more than 2 players. Star Realms at its core is a 2-player game, but there are variants that allow you to play with more players.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is why I don't do the rules normally.
Well, it's been a while since we played this one.
Alright then, so what were your first thoughts about Star Realms?
I don't even remember why I picked this one up. I probably picked it up because it was dead cheap and it was a portion of our lives where we didn't have much disposable income, so I was like, ooh, a board game for...
It was good for travel and we were going on holiday.
Ah, that was it, yeah. And it was actually one of our first deck builders. I mean, being old hands, sort of Magic the Gathering, we played lots of sort of card games and games where you build your deck beforehand, but this concept of building your deck as you play was quite new to us when we picked this up. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to hold my thoughts to the actual review, but it's always been a game that we've had many, many years now, and it just always comes back up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think as well, when you often see sort of requests for what we're a couple or we're playing games, it's one that always comes up.
Yeah, it always.
It always comes to the front as being quite a good game to pick up.
For
Possibly
2 players.
because it's quite cheap, it's quite quick. Well, it can be quite quick.
Yeah, and I would say that it is a definite deck builder. Try it to see if you like that. Because if you don't like this, you don't like deck builders. I would be confident enough to say that.
Agreed. Right, so let's move on to our review. So the first portion of our review of our scoring will be about the general gameplay, and then we'll be following up with a 2-player specific scoring system. So the first general scoring is components.
Well, the cards, mate. No, the cards are fine. You know, they're perfectly well made. I think the artwork on a lot of the cards, because I am a nerd for that kind of thing, is actually really good.
Oh, really? See, I was going to say the opposite.
Oh, really? You don't like it?
Well, it's not that I don't like it. It's just a bit... Maybe it's because it's spaceships.
Yeah, I'm so much more of a sci-fi nut than Hannah is.
Yeah.
Listeners, you
Again,
like your
if
fantasy
they were
stuff.
elves, I'd probably be all over it.
Would it help if they were just like an elf piloting the ships? Would that make it better? Or perhaps a dwarf?
Yes,
Yeah.
and yes.
And dragon-shaped ships, yeah?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, from a sci-fi perspective, I rate the art. I think it's nice. It looks good.
I mean, they're ships.
Yeah. Yes, they are. In space. What more can you want? God.
Teardown and setup is fairly easy and straightforward. I mean, they're cards.
Yeah.
That's it. It takes 2 minutes. If that.
Create your starter deck, deal your hands, create the marketplace. That's it.
Yep. So I scored it a 6.
Okay. Yeah, I scored it a 6 as well. One of the things that worth mentioning is it comes with its own deck of sort of scorecards that represent your life. So you have sort of 10s and 20s and 5s and 1s. And I've always wrestled with whether that's a good thing or not. Sometimes I just crave a pen and paper because I find the whole thing a bit of a faff.
Yes, and for yours truly, who's not always that great at maths, quite often I have to sit there and ask you what my score is.
Yeah, which is not great if somebody really wants to play competitive, but yeah.
It's a nice touch, isn't it?
It is a nice touch. I always use them, but the more we played it, the more like, I just want a pen and paper. I don't need this.
It's because your score can go up and down, that's why I guess.
Yeah,
I suppose.
But yeah, 6. I mean, it's fine for what it is. I will say that the box that it comes in like a classic sort of deck box, is really flimsy.
Yeah, and it's dead dogged. We played it a lot, and it's quite
flimsy,
dogged.
and it's going to abandon ship at some point, and I don't know what we do
nice
after that.
All right, so our next category is complexities. That includes things like analysis paralysis for people like me, arguing about rules, etc.
And how well the complexity serves the gameplay.
Yeah. Over to you.
I think it is a easy to learn game. I think the more cards you add to it, the more complex it becomes. I think the more you understand and know the deck, the more complex it can become, because you can be on the lookout for certain synergies, and you start to understand what the different factions do, and you can react to your opponent on that. So if they're going after something, you know that a faction does something to sort of cancel that out, you can head for it. I think it's wonderfully complex. It's just enough. I think it really serves the gameplay. I don't think it's over the top in any way, shape or form. As I said, easy to pick up. Whenever I've taught this to people, they've picked it up within 10 minutes.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's really good on that front. What about you?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like, the devil in the detail is, the devil's in the cards, really. It's not about the actual game itself. And it's those beautiful synergies when you get them all ticking over all at once. It's absolutely fantastic. I also think that, yes, because we played it so much, we have an insider... we know what synergies work, etc. But I don't think the learning curve is that steep that you can't play it with a newbie. No,
I think while there could be a skill gap to a certain extent, I still think a new person could hold their own against somebody who plays this a lot.
And also, it's what comes up in the flop in the marketplace.
Yeah, it is.
So you can start off going, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then absolutely get screwed over for cards.
Yeah, your best laid plans and all that, they can go to pot quite quickly because you're just not getting the synergies that you want coming up. And then, but again, you can pivot. Then you have to look at it and go, right, okay, maybe I'm going to get some cards and maybe remove cards from my deck. I'm going to sort of start over. There's always options. You never feel like you're trapped. There's always something you can do, which I like.
So how'd you score it?
8.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, that's 2 for 2. We were the same. That's never happened before. Cool.
So shelf life. So we're talking about things like value for money, replayability. And what I will say is this game we just always come back to. We've not played it for a while, admittedly. We've got a lot of new games that we're working our way through. But we play it a lot.
We do, yeah. Although we haven't played it for a while, but I think Marvel Champions are going to play Deck Builder or something like that. You know, a card game. We tend to crack that out, don't we? Yeah, I mean, it's got a great shelf life. We existed on the base game for a very long time before I even thought about buying an expansion.
And then the expansion you got wasn't particularly necessarily adding new rules. It was just more
expand
cards.
More cards. I've never taken the leap to adding more rules because. Weirdly enough, I mean, I'm usually a bit of an expansion fanatic. Like, if I like a game, I want to expand it.
R.I.P. our Wallet and Marvel Champions.
Yes, well, yeah, I mean, Marvel Champions takes up a lot of that. And we'll catch up at some point. But this is one of those games where I haven't, not because I don't like the game, because I don't think we've reached a point where I feel we need it.
Yeah.
We're still having so much fun with just the base game and Colony Wars, which again is, you can buy Colony Wars as the base game, so there's almost like 2 base games added together. That I just haven't felt the need to go buying loads of expansions for it. I haven't needed it. I mean, one of the issues with that is storage. Most of the games that we buy come in boxes. These come in these little deck boxes, and I think a lot of the expansions actually come in almost like trading card game blister packs. So it's then how do you what's your storage solution for that? And I haven't got an answer to it. So I don't want to just random decks of cards with an elastic band around them.
Well, I mean, there are lots of storage options on Etsy and things, but I think the way that we feel about that is we would rather let our collection be done and then buy a storage option.
Because otherwise you'd spend like money on a storage option, you then have to get another one later on because you've got really into it or something. You know.
Although we could just buy some basic storage boxes.
Yes,
that is a thing that we could do.
Yeah, but I think that's the interesting point, isn't it? And it speaks to its shelf life that this is me. I haven't felt the need to expand it. I just haven't felt the need.
So, go on. How do you rate it?
8.
So I gave it a 9.
Okay, fine, but yeah, no, it's a good one. It's got a long shelf life.
Okay. And then our final category under general is fun.
Yeah, I bloody love Star Realms.
Yeah.
It's really good fun every time we crack it out. I don't think I've ever had a game where I haven't enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot. Probably over 50 plays of it by this point. It's just a really fun, easy game to play.
And it can be as casual as you like, or it can be as serious as you like, depending on the mood you're in. If you just want something to occupy you while you're waiting for dinner to cook, then it's good to crack out. If you actually want to go like whole hog,
we being serious tonight, kind of thing.
Then you can absolutely do that as well. And it's really good fun.
Yeah, it is. I can't really fault it. I've never given anything a 10 for fun. I'm not going to start here, but I would give it a 9.
Oh, really? So I've scored it an 8, mainly because I feel like it is a short game. And whilst it's really, really good fun, I think some of the most immense games that we've had have always come from more complex, longer games.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the fault of Star Realms. No, absolutely not. But I've had more fun playing other games.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of scoring it for what it is and the space it occupies. And for me, it's a 9.
Fair enough. So our overall scores is 7.75, so we'll round that up for 8.
Well, yeah, which is one of our highest scoring games so far. So, in a way, in the bonus content is where the real stuff is. No, I think for what it is, I think with the caveat for what it is, I mean, this is not going to stand toe-to-toe with Gloomhaven and Dune Imperium and Nemesis and,
So all games we've not reviewed yet.
Oh, yeah, games we haven't reviewed yet, but you've got to keep the people waiting.
Pipeline guys.
I mean, yeah, we tend to review weightier games, and this is not that.
So on to our 2-player review. So the first category under 2-player is Table Talk. So,
okay, yeah, I mean, this one a little bit less so. I don't think it's a game that you play in silence, but I also don't think they're, aside from the required, I'm doing this amount of damage to you, which you do every turn. There's not a huge amount of back and forth here. Yeah,
so I kind of disagree with that.
Okay.
So, one of the choices that you get to make, for the most part, is where you do damage. Do you do damage to their ship? Do you do damage to your opponent's face? Or do you do damage to their outposts? Some outposts have shields, so you have to...
So you have to clear them.
You have to clear them first. But yeah, you have that whole conversation, and I think there is that talking through your move as well, because actually when you get going and towards the end of it, you might have like 5 ships, like a couple of outposts, a whole bunch of synergies, plus a whole bunch of coins to spend, and I feel there is that kind of discussion that goes on. I also think I found out a fair bit about how you like to play, which is quite aggressively without a huge amount of defence.
Yeah, I suppose from the getting to know you aspect, yeah, you're probably right. Actually, I think people's play styles come out quite a lot in this, and you can learn something about somebody. Mine is like, fire everything, fire torpedoes.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, yeah, okay, you've changed my mind a little bit. I forgot about that aspect of it.
Okay, so how did you score it?
So I originally gave it a 6, but I'm probably going to bump that up to a 7 now.
Oh, I scored it a 7.
Oh, there you go. Just convincing me on your side. That's what happens when you're a host.
And then our next rating scale, our next rating is competitiveness / co-op.
So yeah, I mean, by its nature, it is a 1v1 fight. It is competitive. I think this one's difficult. I find this one quite difficult to score because I think games can be so variable down to the luck of the draw. I think there have been games where once you get established and you both have a good deck and a synergy cooking, it is really competitive. Like really, really competitive. But you get other games where somebody gets what they want and the other person doesn't, and you just sort of steamroll them. Or the other person's taken the Healy faction and it's just this endless...
That's me.
Painful look to the end kind of thing.
Or we've been both fighting for the same faction.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah, you can end up in a situation where we're both fighting for the same thing, although, yeah...
I feel like we've had games where all the cards in the flop have just been really, really expensive, so we're literally fighting for that same one cheap card.
Yeah. So I think it varies. I think it's not a game that you know when you're going to crack it out that you both start on a level playing field and it stays very, very competitive throughout. It does vary. So when it's at its best, hugely competitive, really works. One person can steamroll the other, depending on the luck of the draw. Or poor choices. Usually mine, listeners, which the other person hasn't made. How about you? What are your thoughts?
I think as far as 2-player competitive games go, it's right up there for me. It hits all the boxes that I want. There's a little bit of trash talk. There's a little bit of like face-to-face dialogue. It is competing for what you want. I've also bought cards just to irritate you. You know? Yeah. So for me, it's right up there, and I scored it a whopping 9.
Oh wow, okay. I gave it a 7.
Yeah, reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Scalability.
But didn't you say this was a 2-player game and therefore...
Well, at its core, it is a 2-player game. There are options, even from the core set. I think you need to buy another core set, but there are options to expand it into multiple players, which is why we haven't NA'd this one. Okay. Because there are, in its core rules, there are ways to include multiple players. You don't need to do that.
No, you absolutely don't.
This is a 2-player game. You do not need to bring other people in.
And I think it would dilute it, and I think games can go on depending on,
circumstances, how the cards fall.
The cards that you draw. But I think adding 3 people will just make it more complicated. And then what's going to happen to your third person who's been annihilated?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's multiple different ways to play with 3. Full disclosure, I have never played this with more than 2, but from what I've read... It's not the same. It doesn't work as well. If you've got 3 people or more, crack out something else. And to that end, I score a 10.
Okay, so on that basis, I will score a 9.
Okay.
And that gives a 2-player score of 8. So a great all-round game.
8 and 8, yeah.
Yeah, a great all-round game. Absolutely awesome as 2-player.
Yeah, I completely back that.
If you don't have it, go out and buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not expensive. Although I don't know if it's actually still available. I think I might be completely wrong on this, so forgive me, listeners, if I am wrong, but I feel like they're doing a Kickstarter for a new edition where I think they're pulling in multiple core sets and a few expansions into one sort of actual box, and they're going out with that. I don't think you can get the classic sort of deck box version that I've got anymore. I might be wrong, but I think that's what I remember reading.
Okay, so on to our second game of this 2-game edition
Extravaganza.
extravaganza. We are talking about Codenames Duet.
We are indeed.
Duet?
Duet. Nobody says duet.
Okay. Codenames Duet. So Codenames Duet is a 2-player variant of the traditional Codenames. So in the traditional rules of Codenames, you would have a grid of 25 different random words, although not always as random as you would hope, and you would pair up. And in your pair, you'll have one person who's the guesser and one person who gives clues. You'll also have a grid, which each of your clue givers can see. Some of those will be correct answers, some of those will be wrong answers, and one will be a big
The
X,
assassin.
the assassin card. And if at any point your guesser picks that name, you automatically lose the game. You each take turns, I believe.
Yeah, in traditional Codenames you do, yeah, and it's more about beating the other team as far as I remember.
Yeah. And you have to give a clue, a one-word clue that helps link, ideally, multiple correct answers from the grid. The trick is you can only give one word, and they obviously can't get any of the wrong answers or the assassin card. You also need to say how many words you can possibly link with that one clue.
Yeah, so you'd say something like brain 3, and then I have to choose 3 words from their grid that match that.
Yeah. So then the 2-player variant, so Codenames Duet, is you have the same 25 word grid in the middle, and you each have your own
version of the grid with the right and wrong answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you each give each other clues, and you have a number of lines that you can extinguish, and you have a number of wrong answers that you're able to get.
Yeah.
The challenge then is that you move through a map.
Yep, map of the world, and each location
has a number of right answers that you have to... Well, not right answers.
Wrong answers you're allowed.
Wrong answers that you're allowed.
And turns.
And turns that you're allowed.
Yeah, so you'd have like 9 and 9, which is 9 turns and 9 wrong answers allowed.
Yeah.
And if you fail any of those conditions, every time you make a guess, you take a little counter, don't you, that says how many turns you've had.
Yeah. The thing about Codenames, I find, is that it's if you play with a partner, quite often you do a lot better because you know each other and you know the way each other thinks.
Absolutely.
Whereas Codenames Duet kind of takes that out because it's just aimed at 2 people, and so it's like an even playing field.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Yeah, I think one of the and the joy of Codenames is you can tailor what you do to your team member. I remember when we played Codenames, I played with somebody who's just as nerdy as me, and I was throwing in some really esoteric, like geek references which they were getting, which was really fun. But I think when you play with just the 2 of you, you do know how each other's brains work, and that can be a bit of an impediment sometimes, I find. Yeah. Because you feel quite restricted. You can't sort of go outside the box. It's like, oh, they'll never get that. Oh, they'll never get. I tend to find I think that more than I would be playing with sort of a random person.
Yeah. And also, I mean, when we've played with other people and we played the traditional variant, people haven't necessarily known that I'm absolutely horrendous at geography, and therefore they will say some very obvious geography related ones, and I'll be like, I don't know. So, anything else you want to say before we get on to our ratings?
No, not really. I think we can go straight to the ratings. I think it is sort of run as a campaign, so you have you start off with a sort of easy scenario, and the scenarios are just exactly as we said, just 2 numbers that tell you how many wrong answers you can have. We didn't say how you win. You win by you need to get 15 green cards, which are your agents. So you basically need to collect 15 correct guesses during the time allotted,
which is all the correct answers really on the player grid.
Yes. Yeah.
So you need to get all the right answers in the right number of turns with the
set number.
Allowed number of wrong answers,
and no assassin. Obviously, you've each got that one card which you cannot touch.
Yeah. So, on to scoring. So the first category is components.
I mean, in terms of setup, dead quick. Tear down, dead quick. I think the components overall, bang average. I would have liked the actual clue cards to be slightly bigger. I find they're a little bit thin and flimsy and a bit small.
So here's my bugbear with it. Your grid is a whole bunch of random words, and very helpfully they write the words upside down and right way up so that you can read it from either side of the table. However, one side is a lot smaller, and
in italics, I think.
In italics, and I just find that I'm constantly trying to read the words upside down.
Because the other one's got big, bold, white background, bold typeface. Yeah, I do the same thing. I read the words upside down instead of actually just reading the ones that are facing me.
Yeah,
why they just didn't have the word in the same font in both directions.
I don't really know. And I imagine if you're dyslexic, it's an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, it's probably a complete game breaker.
Yeah, it's a bust. Really, aside from a whole bunch of little cards, that's all there is to it. I think the cards are about the right size given what you're trying to, do.
Yeah, I mean, there's the agent cards, which all have a artistic representation of somebody who's they're all like Uncanny Valley famous people. My favourite is the Jason Statham one. They all look like vaguely like spy characters that you know from movies but are not, which I actually quite like. I think that's quite a nice touch. I think the art on them is quite good. But yeah, aside from that, pretty bang average, I have to say.
So how'd you score it?
Bang average, 5.
Yeah, me too. I really do wish, if you're listening, games developers, that you would just change the wording on the cards. I'm not alone. We are not alone in this. So the next rating scale is complexity.
Well, this is a very, very hard one to rate because the complexity, the actual complexity of the game is almost non-existent. The complexity comes...
Give a clue, guess the word.
Yeah, the complexity comes with trying to tailor that setup of words you have to your playing partner, which is that's where the game is. That's the interesting bit. How well does the complexity serve the game? Fine, I guess. Yeah, like making it more complicated would not make it a better game or anything like that.
Although arguably, to make co-players Duet 2-player, they have added a whole bunch of complexity.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a very non-complex game, party game with a slight tinge of complexity added. But yes, it's not a complex game by its nature. There's just a little bit added on, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's just about right, really, isn't it? It's a party game. It is meant there to be as like a warm-up or just something fun to do at a party.
Yeah, I mean, I think the complexity serves it. So I've been slightly generous here, but I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, 8
because
as well for me.
That's about where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Shelf life.
Yeah. I found myself getting bored with this quicker than a lot of games in our collection. I think once you've had sort of 10-ish games of it, you've kind of seen it all.
But I think the whole point about Codenames is it's there to be played with other people.
I know, which this kind of excises.
Yeah.
Which, I guess, maybe, going back to the complexity point, maybe they should have added a bit more to it. Might get me a bit more interested for a bit longer. I also think that while those stacks of cards look really big to begin with, the clues I'm talking about here, they're not actually that many.
No, they're not. You burn through them fairly quickly.
I tend to find, after we must have had 10 to 15 plays of it, you kind of start crying out for a few more cards in there just to break up the variety a bit. Because you end up a lot of the time with grids with clues that you've seen before. There's combinations of cards that you've seen before and you use the same clues for them, which kind of just feels a bit damp, really. It dampens it. Dampens the fun. And they're such small, slight cards with one word on. I feel like, again, from a value for money perspective, although I can't talk, this was a charity shop find, so I didn't pay full price for this. I don't actually know what it costs full price. I just feel like they could have doubled the number of cards. I know if you already have Codenames, you can take all of the cards from Codenames and stick it in here, which is great, but we don't already have Codenames, so after repeated plays, it feels a bit slight.
Yep, but I think also probably the same criticism could be said of Codenames, the original. It's just that you would only crack it out in such less frequent situations.
You'd have less frequent situations, and you'd probably be playing with different people, or you could mix up the teams, which would make things quite different.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't with this.
Yeah. Interestingly, we never got through the entire campaign.
No.
If you would like, and I can't imagine we will do.
Yeah,
I imagine we'll crack it out once or twice.
Now and again, yeah, but very rarely. I think it's going to be a significant portion of time before we do crack it out again.
So how do you score it?
4.
Yes, likewise. Fun.
I think this is a me issue, But I find this particular game, which I didn't find with Codenames, the original, because I think that's more of a party game kind of atmosphere, and I had a huge amount of fun with that. I find this really frustrating.
Really?
Yeah, it winds me up in a way that board games don't usually. And I think that's because I'm wrestling with my own brain. And I also get frustrated at the... How can you not get that? In a way that I never do with anything else. I don't know why that is. I think it's because you sit there...
you have expectations.
You stare at the grid for ages, and you're like, I have a very clear idea why these 3 or 4 words are linked. And then something just gets wrong on the first go, and you're like, oh, you know... And I don't like that. I don't like that it does that. I don't like that it almost makes you frustrated with your co-op partner. Co-op games, I've never found I've got frustrated with the person I'm playing with, except for this.
That's really interesting, because I find it really good fun. I feel like there's a right time and a place for it.
Yeah.
Like, quite often we'll play it before we'll play something else. I feel like we can only play it for a very short amount of time before we get too into our own heads.
You just disappear into your own head, don't you?
Too far down the bottle of a wine.
Yeah, that too.
But for me, when it's worked, and it's worked really well, I've had really good fun playing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad when you do get a clue and you do it. It's very, very satisfying. But I think, like I say, I think this is a me issue. I think it makes me very, very frustrated. I find it very frustrating. I find it a frustrating experience.
Fair enough.
I have scored it a 5 because I do think that's a me issue. For me personally, I might score it a bit lower. But I don't tend to find myself having a huge amount of fun when playing it.
Okay, so I would say a 7.
Okay, fine.
So that brings us to a total of 5.8, and as always we round up, so that gives us a 6.
Yeah. Seems a little bit high for me. I'd probably go with a 5.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair, and I think probably Codenames...
The complexity's bumped that up. The complexity serving the game has bumped that up, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to our 2-player ratings. Table Talk.
Well, that's the entirety of the game, isn't it? And we put getting to know you as a part of this, and I can't really fault it from that perspective. Yeah, I mean, what about you? I can't think of any negatives there, really.
Well, I mean, we talk about dead time as well, so quite often there will be an awful lot of time that we are sat there just thinking about ways in which we could link words. So we will say, right, we're halfway through the game, we've only got 4 more guesses, and we need to link, like, 10 words, which means we need to link 3s or more. So we sit there and think for a really long time, and that's the bit where I think you find it really frustrating.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of thinking time, isn't there?
However, it's not necessarily about getting to know you. It's more about a validation of I know you, I know the way you think, I got you.
Yeah.
You're going to get this because I'm going to say something really weird and esoteric that most other people wouldn't get.
The normies are never going to get it.
You know, because you know me.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, so there's that rewarding aspect of it if you are playing as somebody who's a long-standing friend or partner that you're like, I know you and I know you'll get this.
Yeah.
Which you can't really get anywhere else.
No.
So
when it clicks and when it works, it's nice.
So yeah, I mean, I've given this one a 9.
So I gave it a 7.
Okay.
Mainly because of the amount of dead time and the amount of thinking.
I think what's interesting about this one when you talk about dead time is for some reason, this one's a bit more guilt-free. If somebody else is taking bloody ages on their turn, you can sit there and browse their phone because you have no input on it whatsoever. So you could just I'm just going to let them think. I'm gonna go off and pour myself a drink. I'm gonna go off and browse my phone for 5 minutes while I think about it. And that's almost guilt free, and that's part of the rhythm of playing the game. Whereas in other games it can be a bit sort of standoffish or disrespectful. It's like, oh, you take ages, So there is that. There's that element of it where it's very much this lone person just in their own space, and you kind of need to lead them to it.
And yet that's such the complete opposite of what Codenames multiplayer.
There's a timer in that, though.
Oh, there is, isn't there?
So you can't sit there just staring at the grid for ages. And there's part of me that wonders if this would have benefited from something like that. I don't know. Because you can... I am not prone to analysis paralysis like you are, but I have sat there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes solid, just staring at this grid, trying to come up with something, especially in clutch situations where we're going to win or lose based on it. Yeah.
Interesting point.
Yeah, so that was 9 from me and 7 from you.
Next rating is competitiveness.
Cooperability in this case.
Yes, cooperativeness.
It's cooperative by its nature. That is the game. But how satisfying is that cooperation?
And I mean, it's not really necessarily, it's not like we're working together to achieve something, it's just I'm giving you clues and you're getting it right or wrong as a result. Like, I don't feel there's that kind of...
There's no strategy, there's no real strategy to it, is there?
Yeah, we're not building something together.
There's a little bit when it comes to using up your turns and your wrong answers, or when you choose how many clues to give people and all that kind of thing. There's a little bit of that, but it never feels satisfyingly joined up in the way a lot of other co-ops do.
Agreed.
So on that basis, I am going to give it a 6.
So I gave it a 5.
Yeah, fine. I mean, I think it is a co-op game by nature, so I've probably bumped that up 1, but it's fairly average in that regard, in terms of how satisfying it feels to work together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scalability we're not going to do, because this is a 2-player variant, and there is no way to play it.
No, not that I know of. I mean, I guess you could
suppose we could also... How does it fare?
Yeah, thinking about it now, you could not play it. You could not play it with more people. Even like, I'm sure there's a variant or a house rule out there, but I can't see it.
Yeah, you just play normal Codenames.
Yeah, so not applicable.
Okay, so that gives us a couples rating score of 6.75. So we'll round up. That makes it 7, which feels high.
It does feel high. I mean, again. The table talk, we both rated it very highly on that, so that's bumped it up. I think.
Do you know what? It would be amazing to play with somebody that you're just getting close with and just getting intimate with.
Not that kind of podcast, Hannah. Tune in for Hannah's advice column.
No, but someone you're trying to get to know, and that would be a really fun game to play. Just to find out a bit more about each other, and I think that would be awesome.
It'd be a great first time you come over to the other person's house for dinner, to crack out, like, while you're waiting for something to cook, and go, let's get to know each other a bit. Like,
for old couples like us, where there's nothing more to learn, it's just a habit experience that leads to frustration because your wife fails to recognise how a saddle and Antarctica can be related by the Blade Runner.
Yeah, exactly. So, approach with caution if you if you've been married or together for more than 10 years.
Okay, all right. Well, that brings us to the end of our special bonus content. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. We would massively appreciate rating on your podcast medium of choice. We've also got all our socials up. But until then, thank you, good night, and be good to each other.
I mean, that's an interesting variant on it. We'll go with that for our specials. Thank you and good night.